Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of RE336, where I take old stories I've narrated and update into modern audio standards. This particular story is called Felt with the Heart, written by joeydeleen. The human was the focus of my earliest memories. She carried her softness on the outside, unusual in a terrestrial creature and practically unique among the slave races of the Empire. The master races tended to favor arthropods and gastropods, like my own kind. In fact, we Tretums made up about 50% of all slaves in the Empire. We had many sensitive appendages for delicate work, and a long, thick rope of dense brain matter, which coiled neatly under our easily accessible shells. Extremely useful as wetware for information storage, and, I'm told, it is also delicious with citrus. We bred easily, producing thousands of offspring each cycle, which were hardy and could be separated from their parents while still in the egg with no ill effects on their asking price. We were pliable and had no culture to speak of, no delusions of grandeur, no inklings of rebellion. Altogether, we are nothing like humans, who, in fact, made rather useless slaves. We were the staple, and they were more of a garnish. They had proved impossible to breed in captivity and only had 4 relatively useful appendages. Their brain matter was tiny and lodged inside a hollow lump of bone, along with many of their sensory organs, making it nearly useless as wetware. They didn't seem at all difficult to catch, in fact. They seemed almost to throw themselves at slaver ships with abandon. But the Empire had yet to find their home planet, and to be quite far from the galactic core. So, there were only a few hundred of them available at any one time, and the top families all clamored to obtain one whenever a new clutch was found. Their rarity was really the only thing they had going for them as a commodity, that and their ability to sing. For a few generations, there was not a single dinner party or gallery opening of note, which did not have a human singer, or even a choir attending. If the entity throwing the event couldn't provide their own human, they would rent one from a patron or friend. It seemed every member of that species could make these beautiful vibrations in the air. My species did not have the sense humans called hearing, but could see their voices as a series of colorful waves, exploding like rays of sun from their mouths and throats. Some of the master races experienced it as a full-bodied thrumming, potentially so sensuous that certain humans were banned from appearing at more decorous gatherings, lest they embarrass members of the nobility. Yes, humans earned their place as some of the most valued of slaves in the Empire. If our human had chosen, she could have spent her life in luxury without ever encountering a single one of her fellow servants. Our household was structured so that our masters never had to see any of us. Our entire existence regulated by machines, which, perhaps ironically, were powered by our own brains. We Tretum provided the wetware that powered the whole house, and were wired into the grid of it in order to do so. We spent our days stationary and alone. Of what little of human husbandry was understood, what was known for certain was that they were most definitely not solitary creatures. Few had been discovered without some kind of companion creature, from a variety of non-sentient species, cephalopods to mammalian. At first, the master races had attempted to remove or kill these superfluous creatures, but invariably the humans concerned would quickly sicken and die, or even run away without them. So, they were allowed to keep their pets with them, their dogs and cats and birds and octopi, and they were allowed to mingle with other slaves. Not other humans, of course. The master races weren't stupid. No gatherings of any slave races were permitted and had not been for generations. But they couldn't see the harm in letting their singers socialize with other species in their own households. This privilege wasn't granted to many. I had never met any other slave before I met our human, or at least I couldn't remember if I had. My very first memory is of her stroking my shell as I stood in my accustomed place under the main board, my brain tethered, as always, to the household machinery. It was an extraordinary feeling to be touched, pressure, and somehow release all at once. I think she whispered to me then, but my mind was still buried in the house and I couldn't see her words. That memory ends with a piercing sorrow as her hand and warmth from her million body left me. I felt much worse pain in my life since then, but the raw power of my first loss still strikes me when I recall it. As unusual as the encounter was for me, I don't believe I would have kept the true memory of it had she not returned the next day and the next. All of my time up until that point had been the same shapeless, tasteless mass before this. An endless mass of clay, grey and thick, with no discernible tang of difference. I realized later that she had shown infinite patience. She visited me, stayed with me, carefully introduced color and spice, and the lingering trail of time. One moment was like another. She shaped them into beads on a string. I don't know how long it took her before I finally followed the string into consciousness. I could not sing as she did, so she taught me language via her fingertips. My first word was water, one of the few consumables we held in common. She trickled it gently over my tentacles again and again until I put together the motion of her fingers and the cool shock of the liquid pouring over my skin. I had never had to ask for anything. There was nothing to want. Liquid nutrients were pumped directly into my stomach. My body, more importantly my brain matter, were maintained by constant, gentle mechanical manipulations. I was not used for physical work, so even moving my appendages with a purpose was unfamiliar to me until her. As I said, I don't know how long it took, but it was many years. Years in which I believe she was subjected to intense loneliness. I am grateful, however, that at least I and a few others in the household were finally talking to her before her dog passed away. She had named him after a food, one, she explained, that could sting their senses in a strangely compelling way. He had licked my shell a few times and submitted to strokes from my tentacles. I assumed at first that he could also talk, and it was my failing that I did not understand him, but she explained to me that his sapience was not that extensive. Yet, she loved him, a creature who was no use to her except as a friend, and he loved her as I did. I can't claim that I really knew Pepper, but his passing taught me of grief. It taught me how the beads of my string were fragile and thus precious. She could have gone then, I think, but she stayed. She has tried to prepare me. I will, perhaps, never reach her heights of intellect. I was born to run vacuum cleaners and ovens of my master, and for a long time, and majority of my life, there was nothing else. But even in my banality, I could see what she wanted. I could feel it in the ridges of my shell. I had known it from the first time she brought me a poem written by another of my kind in the house. Simple words, composed with richness of emotion I could never have imagined by myself. She brought me many, many words from others, some from other species in the house, some from my own. She gave them my words in turn. She built a network of stories and poems, a string of emotion and history between us, like a necklace strung with her own glorious song, binding us together. This, she told me, is a taste of freedom. This, she whispered, is worth fighting for. Before she left, we had begun talking amongst ourselves, by ourselves. Through the wiring of the house, like so many singing beads on a string, we even started reaching out to other houses, other regions, all around the empire. Some had their own humans and were waiting for us. Others were still blind. It took time. It took patience. Languages shifted, blended together, began to hum in harmony, invisible to the master races. Exponentially, my world grew until I could see everywhere. Still, I don't know how she got out. I don't know how any of the humans got out. Over the course of a few weeks, every human in the Empire just vanished. The slaves, of course, knew before the master races figured it out. Word travels quickly amongst the strings that tie us together. I think now that she was never really a slave. She stayed for us. Perhaps she was only here in the first place because we were here, and we needed her. I think now that maybe I'll speak to her again. My dear friend, the human, when all of this is over, I hope that we'll have much to say to each other. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.